Potato Diary. My cat jumped on me as the intro video was playing. My name is Peter Klein. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we're not going to let a cat get in the way. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. On the show, we're going to look at a couple of massive games from the NHL last night, plus the Toronto Blue Jays with a big win in their home opener. We're getting ready for UFC 300, looking at some of the key fighters to watch on that card. Plus, it was WWE Monday Night Raw after Wrestlemania, so we're going to break down what all of that means. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's talk some baseball. Toronto Blue Jays with a 5-2 win over the Seattle Mariners in the Jays home opener last night, and this is what this is supposed to look like for Toronto this season. Like, for the best case scenario for the Blue Jays, this was kind of it. Oh, she's freaking out. This was kind of the best case scenario for this team. Stepping on the keyboard. You look at like how this team is going to really have some success. Well, the big hitters have to step up. I would say check. Vlad comes up with some big hits, Bo comes up with some big hits, and it really sparks things. And then the rest of the guys in the offense are going to have to come up with some key hits to let them get rolling. Well, I would say check and check. Defensively, they're going to have to play pretty sound. And with one exception, they did that. And then the pitching staff is going to have to step up in a big time way, and they absolutely did with a phenomenal performance from Barrios. Let's start with the big guys getting the big hits. Vlad and Bo really sparked the Blue Jays in this game, and we said on the Catlin Autocast yesterday, it felt like Bo was coming around. He was starting to barrel up some balls. He loves going the other way, and you got the Bo Bichette special in this game against Seattle as he goes the other way on a pitch, lacing it off of the wall, creating a run-scoring situation for the Blue Jays. That was an absolute rocket, and so this gives you some confidence now around this Blue Jays team. Not that all of a sudden they're going to be the 61 Yankees or anything like that, but this is going to be a team that at least has their big guys going a little bit and can get a bit of a spark from there, because Vladdy is spraying the ball all over the field right now with line drives everywhere. You love to see that. Would you like to see maybe a little bit more elevation and some home runs? Sure, but the line drives get you big hits, and big hits lead to some runs. And this team just wasn't hitting the ball hard at all last week. Some really uncompetitive at-bats against Houston and New York. They didn't have as many of those against a pretty good pitcher in Luis Castillo, who admittedly is struggling to start the season, but he is still someone who I think you have to be very concerned about. And the Blue Jays, I thought, had some big hits from their big guys in that game. And then the secondary guys need to come up with some big hits. Turner looked like he was going to hit a home run, but that one hit off of the wall. You have Kirk coming up with a big hit as well that drove in the first run of the game. I don't know if the microphone's picking up my cat scratching right beside it. And then you have Davis Schneider with two of the biggest hits of the game for Toronto, or at least two good hits in this game for Toronto that helps kind of keep that line rolling. They need that. This is not going to be a team that scores 5 runs on 7 hits and 3 home runs. This is going to be a team that the line has to keep moving, and some of these depth options are going to have to step up with big hits and big times, and Toronto did that. The next big key for Toronto is going to be defense. If you're not going to be a team that scores a bunch of runs, sure would help to stop them. And I think specifically Kevin Kiermaier came up with a couple phenomenal plays out in center field, holding guys to just a single when it looked like a sure double, presumably throwing runners out at third base. But then you also see like Barrios makes a good play covering first base. Biggio made a couple really strong plays at second base for this Blue Jays team. That is going to be such a key for them this year. They have to be basically perfect with the glove if they're going to make some noise in the American League this year. Which is why plays like what IKF did are so incredibly frustrating. So if you miss the play, Kiermaier makes a really good play to cut the ball off. Runner's trying to go first to third, and he throws a hose right to third base, beats the runner by several feet. But IKF takes his eyes off, looks up, sees that they might be able to get a guy out at second. They can't. Looks up, misses the tag basically, comes up throwing, and the ball gets to second base like while the guy is standing on the bag. They go to review, miss the tag entirely. You cannot make that type of a mistake. Doesn't end up coming back to bite him because Barrios balled out. But you cannot make that type of a play. It is just a concentration play. Can't happen. Can't do it. This team is not good enough to be giving up extra outs and extra runs to teams that are struggling offensively like Seattle. That was a huge play it could have been a huge play in the game. If Seattle was going to get back in it, that was a chance to. Instead of runner at second, 2 out, and you've just made a great play, now they're second and third, 1 out, and you're a batter away from the top of the order. You can't do that. And like I want to like IKF. I liked him a lot when he was with Texas. I thought that he had a pretty good bat and his defensive versatility was a real weapon. The bat has just kind of gone away. He does bounce back with an RBI in the last game, but he has to be the glove guy. Glove guys don't make those types of mistakes. And again, he's lucky Barrios kind of bails him out with a strong performance on the mound, but you could make an argument that like he has to battle through a couple of extra batters, and now he doesn't get to finish out the 7th inning after he gives up that little bloop single when then they bring in Jimmy Garcia. So it's just, these plays need to stop. Because right now, there is a very easy replacement for him in Ernie Clement, who could just slide right into third base. Biggio can slide right into third base. IKF needs to prove why investing a couple of years and a few $1 million into him made more sense than making the trade the Yankees did for John Birdie, or just spending that money to try to improve elsewhere. One last one. Davis Schneider needs to be in the lineup more. I know this has been a big conversation on Blue Jays Twitter the last little bit. I will continue it here. A couple of big hits in this game, both of them coming with 2 strikes, and just simplifying the approach, get the bat on the ball, and have some good things happen. That is exactly what you need from Davis Schneider. And for a team that is struggling offensively, he is clearly one of your better hitters right now. So I think you have to get him in the lineup more than not. And look, I understand I haven't looked for the lineups yet. If he's not in there tonight with Bassett on the mound, I don't mind that, because a lot of balls get put in play with Bassett out there, and you need your optimal defensive lineup. And as much as I like Schneider, there's a better defensive left fielder in Varsho. There's a better defensive third baseman in Clement or IKF. You're not taking Bo out of the lineup. And at second base, again, you can go Clement or IKF, and you feel very good about where they are at second base. So if Schneider's not in the lineup tonight, I'm not going to light my Blue Jays jerseys on fire, but he is absolutely someone who should be in there more often than not, because he is something this lineup is desperately lacking right now, and that is a good offensive player. So we'll see what the Blue Jays can do tonight, again, with Bassett on the hill. Watch for the Catlin Autocast for a more in-depth Blue Jays talk coming out every Monday here on the Couch Potato Diary Sports Network. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am at Primetime Klein. All right, let's get into a couple of key games from the NHL last night. It is getting into crunch time in the NHL, and a couple of big games in the National Hockey League last night with a couple of big performances. Let's start with the Vancouver Canucks, a monster performance that they needed in a big-time way. They are now 5 points clear of the Edmonton Oilers for top spot in the Pacific Division. Edmonton does have 2 games in hand, but you feel a whole lot better about 5 points up with 2 games in hand than 3 points up with 2 games in hand. And now word out of Edmonton is Connor McDavid, a little bit banged up day to day, but maybe he gets rested down the stretch now if that top spot is just a little bit more out of reach. So we'll see. It's still... if they win both of them, it's still a 1-point edge. So we'll see. But this is just, cannot stress how big of a win this is for the Canucks. So how did they get it? Offensively, a lot of the focus is Garland, Miller, and Joshua. They drove a lot of this on the offensive side. For Garland and Joshua, they've been a part of the energy for the Canucks all season long. They've had a couple of different line mates there, but overall, these 2 guys have really been able to bring it on the offensive side of things this season, and that has allowed for the big players to kind of keep that momentum going, but it's allowed for the Canucks to be able to roll quite a few lines. I mentioned around the trade deadline time, when everyone's clicking on this team, this might be the deepest forward unit in the National Hockey League. It's just so good what they're able to do. And now Miller, who's having probably his best run with the Canucks, steps in between the middle, and you have a legitimate scoring line now with this group that you feel really, really comfortable in throwing them out there in these offensive situations. And Garland, he ends up getting a couple of goals in this game, helping to provide a spark for a Canuck team that really needed it. And it's not just like rush down the wing, shot scores. It's winning battles in front, getting to loose pucks, creating opportunities, and putting them in the back of the net. The Canuck power play has got a lot of focus, as it has certainly fallen off from the breakneck pace it was on at the beginning of the season. But you feel now, yes, was that run they were on at the beginning of the year unsustainable? Of course it was. Is this still a really dangerous power play? Of course it is. And the big weapon up top is Quinn Hughes' shot. And he had one big shot that led to a couple of scoring opportunities, and he has another big shot that leads to a goal that helps the Canucks in this game. And so for teams going up against the Canucks, you are going to have to mind yourself, because this power play, while it's fallen off a little bit, is still an absolute weapon for Vancouver. And I think the big thing for the Canucks in this game, like, they were down 2-0, 2 shots in from Vegas. The Canucks have not had good goaltending since Demko went down with an injury, which you can understand. But it's a good thing they built up that cushion in the Pacific, because it does seem like they're going to need every bit of it coming here down the stretch. And we talked on the last show about how important home ice advantage is going to be for Vancouver if they want to get that top spot in the Pacific Division. They're going to need Demko to be back and ready to go right for the beginning, because this goaltending issue is not going away with these two backups. And those were a couple real backbreakers for Vancouver. But credit the Canucks for being able to bounce back after a couple real devastating goals and work their way back into it and kind of control things against Vegas. I thought even at 2-0, it was like, man, Vancouver has felt like the better team in this game, and eventually they're able to show it. For Vegas, they just looked all right. Obviously, there are some reinforcements coming, and the top players look great. Eichel gets a couple. Marchessault with a real good setup on a real rough defensive play by Soucy, who is having more of those as what we get later into this season, kind of bringing up again the point of maybe Vancouver should have gone and got another defenseman. One of the ones who I thought they maybe should have got scored in this game, as Hannafin is able to put one in on a not great goal allowed by Vancouver goaltending. But like, reinforcements are coming. I don't think it's time to panic for Vegas or anything like that. It's interesting. A loss here means that they are still in line to play Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs. So a little bit interesting there. The other big game of the night, it was the Pittsburgh Penguins special teams letting them down. They get a very important point out of this game against Toronto, but they had a real opportunity to get a couple. The power play goes 0 for 5 last night, and it just felt like the offense would build up some momentum. They get a power play, and it just stops. And another power play, and it just stops. And another power play, and then Marner gets a breakaway, and then Toronto gets a power play. They were able to create a couple of chances off it. Samsonov was able to make a couple of big saves in this game, but this power play is now 3 for its last 30, and that just sets you back. When the margin for error is so thin, to be able to get those goals while you have an advantage and only need to score 1 or 2 even strength goals in a game, it just makes life so much easier. So that power play needs to get figured out. But Crosby and Malkin were really impressive in this game. Malkin, a good steal from Lyubushkin, setting up a Raquel goal. Crosby had a couple of really good setups and won a puck battle that led to the O'Connor goal last night. Both those guys are 100% leading this team in a tremendous direction, and they continue to be the sentimental favorite. Big game tonight in the East with Detroit taking on Washington. And lastly, on the hockey note, Matthews gets his 65th of the year, kind of tying a modern day record with Alex Ovechkin. It's just absurd what this guy is doing. And the goal last night, he's off of his back foot, fires a one-timer that you would shoot at the end of warm-up and you're just dicking around, and it goes like 95 miles an hour into the back of the net. He is incredibly talented, and it has been just a treat to watch this guy do what he has been doing this season. And look, I know we love to make fun of Toronto, and okay, well, this team not going to prove anything to me in the regular season. We got to see it in the playoffs. If that is your mentality, A, for the whole Toronto team, you're probably not far off. But B, I do think if you're just writing it off as, oh, another regular season for Toronto, LOL, you are really doing yourself a disservice, because this is something really special that is happening right now. And I get that there's frustration with how the Leafs are covered. And whenever there's an MVP board, it's the top 3 of Kucherov, McDavid, and McKinnon. And then Sportsnet will try to just kind of shoehorn in like, oh, but don't forget about Matthews. Don't forget. And it can be absurdly annoying, but that still shouldn't discount what an incredible season this guy is having. And just one more note, like, there are some monster goal scoring seasons this year, right? I do think, like, because we're getting a bunch of 50 and this one in the 60s, it makes 40 seem a little less impressive. But Draisaitl getting 40 for the fifth year in a row and Besser getting to 40 goals this year, I think are accomplishments that both should be looked at and applauded. Draisaitl for just the absolute machine that he is, and Besser for his ability to bounce back and really kind of maximize the talents that we all thought he could have. He has been, I think, a real X factor in getting the Canucks to a spot where they are in the driver's seat for top spot in the Pacific with a couple weeks left in the regular season. So the hockey season carries on. The playoffs are going to be a blast, but these last couple of weeks are going to be just as fun. Hopefully you think this show is fun. If you're listening in podcast form, make sure you subscribe and leave a review. If you're watching, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. All right, let's get into some fight talk. It is UFC 300 week. Yesterday, we looked at the storylines for the main event. Today, we are looking at some of the non-main event fights you should watch out for. It is UFC 300 week. Our preview of the big event continues here on Couch Potato Diary as we look at a few of the fights to watch. Now, yesterday, I feel like I kind of danced around the point looking at the storylines for the main event and just thinking about it more. I feel like we were expecting big stars in the main event for UFC 300. And it does kind of feel now like they are using the main event to create a big star. If Alex Pereira can go out and do what we expect him to do and beat Jamal Hill and do what he has been doing, then this is such a huge spotlight. And again, the rise has been meteoric, but you think about it. The win over Israel Adesanya, he's now a 2-division champion, and he can get a win in the main event on one of the biggest fight cards in the history of the sport. Instead of using star power to build this event up, they're kind of using the event to build up the star power of one of their fighters. Now, that is giving them way more credit than they deserve. I don't think they were set up properly around this fight. I think they went out of their way to be like, no, we're not just going to load up 300. We're going to give you big fights along the way. And then they got to making 300. And it was like, fuck. And the co-main event, Wei Li against Yao Jianan. That should be taking place in China somewhere, instead of being thrown onto this to kind of beef it up a little bit. So there have been, I think, just a few steps missed along the way in building this card up, but I do think that what we have now is an opportunity to create a couple of big stars out of UFC 300. We have a couple big stars facing off for the BMF title in the third from the top fight. It is Justin Gaethje against Max Holloway, two all-time great violence guys stepping up in a big-time fight. And the trajectory for both these guys has been very interesting over the past little while. Like, both guys have had really impressive fights and Hall of Fame type resumes. They are both probably toward the tail end of their career, although Holloway's only 32. It's a hard 32, but he's still 32 years old. Both have had some big losses relatively recently, some big wins as well, but some big losses relatively recently that have kind of set their perception back. But Gaethje bounces back. He was basically buried, and he's going to face Fiziev. It's going to just basically be a passing of the all-violence torch to this young man, and that's going to be that. And then Gaethje head kicks him, and then he comes up with an amazing performance against Poirier, and now we're looking at him as an unstoppable world beater again. Holloway has had a rough trip up to 155 pounds before. He gets beat up by Volkanovski, but now he's won back-to-back fights in, again, pretty convincing fashion. So you have two fighters who look like they were kind of down and have brought that roller coaster back up and are now leading to a chance for a real important win. Gaethje with a win, there is a lightweight title eliminator on this card, so I would be surprised if a win gets him a title shot, but it certainly gets him significantly closer. I think Holloway with a win, he does get a title shot against Topuria, depending on what Volkanovski wants to do, but I think it puts him in line for a shot at a big championship match, so a big fight feel for this one. We mentioned the lightweight title eliminator. It is Charles Oliveira taking on Arman Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan getting a chance to build off of the biggest win of his career against Beneil Dariush, while Oliveira is looking to bounce back after a loss to Makhachev, and he did so with a win over Beneil Dariush. Normally I say, look, Tsarukyan has not fought anyone on this level, and that is 100% true. There are very few fighters on the Charles Oliveira level. Oliveira incredibly skilled, but I do think Sarukian is pretty live in this bout. I think that there are some real opportunities for him to really show what he can do. Again, Oliveira, one of the more well-rounded fighters in the sport and so talented, but Sarukian can really bring it as well. So I'm very excited to see how this fight plays out. Bo Nickel back in the spotlight. He's 5-0 in his MMA career. His longest fight has gone 2 minutes and 54 seconds. This is another opportunity here to build this star in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And, again, huge spotlight, huge opportunity for this guy to really look like something that people can get very excited about. And it's kind of, I'm not going to compare the two because one's in the news for very bad reasons right now. But it is kind of similar, I think, to John Jones being on UFC 100. And look, we got some star power up here, but watch this kid for the next 100 UFCs. He could be one of the future stars of this sport. On the undercard, Kayla Harrison is fighting. This is a big damn deal. Kayla Harrison for a long time has been the best female fighter not in the Ultimate Fighting Championship and has an opportunity now to show her stuff in what the UFC calls the ultimate proving ground. On the one hand, she gets a big spotlight. She's on UFC 300 and her fight is going to be on ESPN, which does mean more eyeballs. I do worry it's being overshadowed a little bit. And she has done a good job of getting herself out there media-wise in the build-up to this fight, not just here on Fight Week where everyone's going to be doing the media stuff. But she has been out there for a couple of weeks just reminding people hey, I'm going to be in the UFC and this is going to be a big deal. She's facing Holly Holm. I just feel like with all the other stuff we've talked about on this show, that this kind of gets lost in the wash a little bit. And another fight that I'm really looking forward to. Look, it's the whole card that I'm looking forward to, but Bobby Green against Jim Miller is a chance for just some old school violence. And I can't wait. This whole card is going to be electric. I am so excited. We're going to continue our coverage of UFC 300 all throughout the week. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to be looking at the legacy of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Coming up on Thursday, I've done it for the men. I'll now do it for the women. Pound for pound, all-time female MMA rankings, and pound for pound today. Female MMA rankings. Those will be revealed coming up on Thursday's show. As well as looking at some key fights that have been announced outside of UFC 300. Then Friday is the big preview where we go fight by fight, breaking down the whole card. All right. It is a big weekend for the UFC. It was a big weekend for the WWE, and they capped it all off with a fun episode of Monday Night Raw. Let's talk about it. The Raw after Wrestlemania, setting an all-time gate record for the WWE, breaking a record that stood for 7 days as the WWE's box office roll continues. And the big story coming in, obviously, Cody Rhodes finishes his story at WrestleMania. So, how are they going to follow up on it? And I thought they did an exceptional job of following up on what they did. The Rock coming out with that promo with Cody creates some intrigue. Eventually. I understand the old school wrestling thing is if you think you're going too fast or if you think you're going too slow, slow down. And sometimes that you let that crowd really build and really, really start to hate you. It did feel like you reached the point of diminishing returns where you just kept letting him boo. And I think it went to the point from creating good heat to kind of making this feel almost insufferable and taking away from the moment a little bit. And then that you get the promo, Rock wanting to hold the championship, Cody being like, well, I'll hold mine if you can hold mine if I can hold yours. The crowd chants, this is awkward. And it's funny how perception changes. Because a year ago, this same promo, I would have been frustrated. They didn't build off of last night. What even was that moment? It was so weird. It's not setting up for anything. And now it's this year. It's a new creative regime. And I'm just assuming that it's all going to build to something down the line. And it's going to be epic. With The Rock handing Cody something that he was very unsure about. And then Rock saying, don't break my heart again. I feel like these are going to be things that are very important down the line. But you get the real celebration of Cody, and that's more what I meant about how they build off of it. Like, they just continued to make this feel like such a big damn deal for Cody Rhodes with the video tribute and all of that. I thought he did a great job. Then we got into the wrestling, 45 minutes into the show. Ilya Dragunov getting a fun spotlight against Shinsuke Nakamura. I was hoping Nakamura would be one of the post-WrestleMania projects. He was a project leading into the Royal Rumble. It's fallen off a little bit, but I do think that this is still someone who the WWE is going to have some pretty high hopes for. And he is a very good wrestler to showcase what Ilya Dragunov can do. I find Ilya to be a little over the top, where it looks like he has been shot every time he sells anything, and it's just all over the place, all the time, crazy, wild, whatever. There's a spot for that, for sure. I'm a little dizzy just doing that. There's a spot for that, for sure. He has a lot of really fun stuff in his bag, and I could totally see him getting drafted at the end of the month. I just wish it would be toned down just the slightest bit. You can tighten it up just a little bit and make this character truly something to get really excited for. Also in here, we got the continuance of Candice LeRae and her frustration with Indy Hartwell as Roxy Perez comes in and picks up a win over Indy. I felt like this was more of a showcase of the NXT Women's Champion than here comes Roxy. Because they've just started this heel character with her. And I think we saw on Monday, this is an extremely talented performer. And truly feels like she could be the future of the women's division, but I think she has some things to work out as a heel performer. I like her as a babyface. I love her as a babyface. But I think as a heel, she still has some refining to do. So this was a showcase for her. Got to plug NXT coming up later on today. But I think there's still some work to go with her. Miz, R-Truth, and John Cena go up against the Judgment Day. This was a blast. You get a decent promo from Damian Priest. It certainly felt small time after the Cody stuff. It was always going to. And Priest's mic work is not what sells him. So like, you got a couple of like key shots with him and Rhea holding the titles. No sense of any issues within the Judgment Day or anything like that. And then the match was exactly what it needed to be, with some John Cena fun in there. Sami Zayn and Chad Gable was a very good setup. Everyone was expecting the turn for Gable. Now they just get a match for Montreal. I still feel like you're going to get that big turn from Gable, and it's just going to get that more heel heat there in Montreal, with the crowd being so far behind Sami Zayn. But they both put on a good show. It is setting up for a big spotlight, and it feels like this could be like a real show stealer next week, with Michael Cole already saying that this has the potential to be an instant classic. It just elevates both performers, and I think that's a really good thing. Jade squashes Chelsea Green. We all know Jade has some work to do, but she obviously looks like a star. And there's a lot that you can work with this particular performer. So very excited to see where she goes. And then in the main event, Jey Uso becomes the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight Championship. And I think a lot of the players in this come out looking really good, right? Like Bronson Reed looked like a monster. Real good promo with the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal trophy. Ricochet comes up with the highlight of the night with a 450 off of the top rope to the floor through a table, and just all the great Ricochet stuff. Drew McIntyre looked like he had the match won, but the story with CM Punk continues, and then Jey ends up getting the win. I do think there's some work to do to make Jey feel like a legitimate world championship contender, and also to make this feel like a legitimate main event with a couple of guys who were on the mid-card for the WWE yesterday. So I do think that there is some work to do, but the match anyway will be an absolute barn burner. And I think you'll have a couple performers looking to go out there and steal the show at Backlash coming up in a couple of weeks' time out in France. This was not a crazy, oh my god, do you remember the 2024 night after WrestleMania? But it was still a lot of fun, and it continued that momentum for the WWE into this new era. And I would bet that they're going to try to make the SmackDown a big deal as well. And I would guess we get a big SmackDown coming up on Friday with a couple other surprises and debuts in this one as well. All right, that's going to do it for the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. One more time, if you're watching, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. If you're listening, make sure you subscribe and leave a review. Follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/PrimetimePK. You can email the show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. Coming up tomorrow, already went through what we're going to be talking about on the UFC side. Some more big NHL and NBA games coming up tonight, so we'll be looking at that. And on Dynamite, our Toronto Raptors podcast, hey, they've won a couple of games. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more with the Raptors. Thank you guys so much, and I will talk to all of you later.